Good morning to all of you. Now, today's interaction, we are going to study a very important topic in esophageal disorders that comes under neoplastic disorders, and that is carcinoma esophagus. In the previous interaction, we have already studied the non-neoplastic conditions of esophagus. Now, today we are going to study the carcinoma esophagus, the clinical features. We'll discuss the basic points regarding the presentation of the patient suffering from carcinoma esophagus, along with the spread. How does it spread through various routes? Now, as you already know that neoplasms of the esophagus can be basically divided into two broad groups: the benign tumors and the malignant tumors. Now, under benign tumors variety, basically the benign lesions presenting as swellings affecting the esophagus, they are very rare. But the important difference between benign and malignant tumors affecting the esophagus is most of the benign tumors affecting the esophagus are not of epithelial origin, benign tumors affecting the esophagus, whereas the malignant tumors of esophagus, they are usually epithelial in origin. Remember this point. So, a very few patients suffering from benign tumors of esophagus, like true papillomas, adenomas, and hyperplastic polyps, they belong to epithelial origin, a minority of patients. But the majority of benign tumors, they are not epithelial in origin. They are not originating from the epithelium. Majority of benign tumors. Example, the GIST, the gastrointestinal stromal tumors, GIST, the lipoma, the granular cell tumor, they arise from the various layers of esophageal wall, but they do not belong to epithelium. Non-epithelial in origin, the majority of benign tumors. Remember this fact. Most of the benign tumors are small and asymptomatic. Even a large benign tumor only presents with mild symptoms. So, very important fact, we must take multiple biopsies. Suppose we are doing an upper GI endoscopy in a patient presenting with dysphagia sometimes, or due to some other indication, some disorder related to stomach or duodenum, or sometimes common bile duct stones, we are doing upper GI endoscopy, and we have seen during that endoscopy, let's say, a swelling that is present in the lower part of the esophagus. So we must take multiple biopsies and we must prove that this lesion is not malignant. Take home message: always consider any swelling that is present in the esophagus as malignant unless proved otherwise. So always take biopsy during upper GI endoscopy if we are going to see some sort of swelling that is present in the esophagus. This is the take-home message for benign tumors affecting the esophagus. The non-epithelial primary malignancies, the malignant tumors, the second variety, these are rare. In benign one, the non-epithelial ones were the common group. In malignant tumors, the non-epithelial primary malignancy is rare. For example, malignant melanoma, rare. The secondary malignancies, for example, it's also rare except in cases of bronchogenic carcinoma. These patients, the patients suffering from bronchogenic carcinoma, they may directly invade the esophagus or through the lymph nodes and can involve the esophagus. So primary is in the bronchus or in the lungs. Sometimes they can involve the esophagus due to these routes. So the take-home message, most of the malignant tumors of the esophagus, they are epithelial in origin. The carcinoma esophagus. This is the 6th most common malignancy in the world, the carcinoma of the esophagus, usually seen in adult age group. 5-year survival rate is just 5 to 10%, very poor survival rate. Why poor survival rate? Because in our country, most of the patient, they present late, delayed presentation is there. So early diagnosis usually not possible. That's why poor survival rate, one of the contributing factor. As you all know, two basic varieties, the squamous cell carcinoma and adenocarcinoma. The squamous cell carcinoma usually affects the upper 2/3 of the portion of the esophagus. The adenocarcinoma, lower 1/3. For squamous cell carcinoma, tobacco and alcohol, common etiological factors, they predispose for squamous cell carcinoma, tobacco and alcohol. Whereas gastroesophageal reflux disease, a patient suffering from GORD on long-term basis, again a factor responsible for development of adenocarcinoma in lower 1/3 of the esophagus. Nowadays, the incidence of adenocarcinoma is increasing. Previously, the most common variety was squamous cell carcinoma throughout the world, but in the Western countries, this adenocarcinoma is increasing. Whenever there is a patient presenting with dysphagia and we are suspecting carcinoma esophagus, and on clinical examination, suppose you are going to have a finding that various lymph nodes are enlarged, it is a bad prognostic sign. Presence of palpable lymph nodes, bad prognostic factor. Usually dysphagia is the most common presenting symptom, but this is usually seen very late, usually in advanced diseases. So for curative treatment, if we want to treat a patient completely, if we want to cure the patient as far as the carcinoma esophagus is concerned, the accurate pre-treatment staging is mandatory, essential. We must go for it. As we have already discussed, the squamous cell carcinoma, upper 2/3 portion, adenocarcinoma, lower 1/3 of esophagus. So squamous cell carcinoma, most common worldwide, but nowadays adenocarcinoma incidence is increasing, especially in the Western countries. As far as the squamous cell carcinoma affecting the upper 2/3 of the esophagus is concerned, this is endemic in Transkei region of South Africa and Asian Cancer Belt, and this Asian Cancer Belt extends from the northern Iran up to the China. And the highest incidence in the world of this carcinoma esophagus, the squamous cell carcinoma variety, is seen in Lingxian in Henan province in China. More than 100 cases per 100,000 population per year. So highest incidence, remember, in the world regarding the squamous cell carcinoma esophagus is in Henan province in China. Now, what is the reason? Few factors are there, like fungal contamination of food and nutritional deficiencies, various nutritional deficiencies, they have contributed in the highest incidence in the China of this squamous cell carcinoma variety affecting the esophagus. And how can we say that? In these population, if we are going to increase the amount of beta carotene in the diet along with the supplementation of vitamin E and selenium, the incidence reduced in these endemic areas. That's why we are saying that these factors are the various nutritional deficiencies. These could be one of the contributing factor in the development of squamous cell carcinoma. Now in the Western countries, adenocarcinoma is increasing. What could be the possible causes? Yes, obesity, gastroesophageal reflux disease, and Barrett's esophagus. They all predispose for adenocarcinoma development, affecting the lower 1/3 of esophagus. At the same time, there is similar increase in the incidence of carcinoma of the cardia of the stomach, the portion of the stomach joining the esophagus. So, in some sense, the cardia of the stomach cancer and carcinoma esophagus, they must share some common etiological factors. And 60% of all upper gastrointestinal tract cancers, especially in the Western countries, they involve cardia or distal esophagus. The upper GI cancers involving cardia or distal esophagus, 60% of the patient, Western countries. Both the varieties, the adenocarcinoma as well as squamous cell carcinoma, they tend to disseminate very early. Dysphagia, regurgitation, and weight loss, they are combinedly in a group, can be seen only when there is advanced primary tumor. So most of the time patient presents late, so delayed diagnosis is there. Now next question arises, how does this carcinoma esophagus spread? The answer is 3 ways. First, any tumor that is present in the esophageal lumen or arising from the epithelium of the esophagus that can invade directly through the esophageal wall and involving the surrounding structures. The first way of spreading of carcinoma esophagus, direct invasion. Second way is via lymphatics. The third is through bloodstream, the hematogenous spread. So direct invasion first, second lymphatic, third hematogenous. And especially if the carcinoma is arising, the adenocarcinoma is arising from the intra-abdominal part of the esophagus, sometimes it may spread directly through the transperitoneal route. So the first route, the direct is spread in both directions. Laterally, it spreads through the esophageal wall, various components, various layers, and longitudinally, within the esophageal wall, it can go towards the cranial side, means towards the head end, or caudally towards the stomach side. And how does it spread longitudinally within the esophageal wall? through the submucosal lymphatic channels of the esophagus. Longitudinal spread. How it is important to know this? This is suggestive of that the lymphatic drainage pattern of the esophagus is not segmental. Whereas in other parts of GI tract, whenever there is malignancy, usually the lymphatic drainage is segmental variety, the segmental type. But in carcinoma esophagus, the pattern of lymphatic drainage is not segmental. And that's why the length of the esophagus involved by tumor is much longer most of the time than macroscopic length of malignancy at epithelial surface in the lumen of the esophagus while doing upper GI endoscopy. So longer length of the tumor longitudinally spread as compared to the visible size of the lesion in the esophageal lumen. This is very important. Now this lymph node spread is very common to the regional lymphatics, and it can spread through the cranial direction as well as the caudal direction. The caudal direction spread is most predominantly seen. Whenever there is widespread lymph node involvement, the carcinoma esophagus, it can involve any node from superior mediastinum up to the celiac axis and lesser curvature of the stomach, regardless of the location of primary lesion within the esophagus. It doesn't matter whether the lesion is situated in the middle 1/3 or lower 1/3 or upper 1/3. But if there is widespread lymph node involvement, the metastatic disease is there or widespread disease is there, it can involve any lymph node just mentioned from superior mediastinum up to the lesser curvature of the stomach, the celiac axis. Most commonly the hematogenous spread, it goes to the liver, lungs, brain and bones. As we have already discussed, the tumors arising from the intra-abdominal esophagus, transperitoneal spread can be seen in addition to all the other three, the direct spread, the lymphatic spread and the hematogenous spread. And this is the fourth one, transperitoneally. Now, after finishing the basic points regarding carcinoma esophagus and about the spreading of carcinoma esophagus, various methods, various ways, now let's very quickly go through the clinical features, the presentation of a patient suffering from carcinoma esophagus. The most of the patient, they present with mechanical symptoms like dysphagia, the most common presentation. Few patients, yes, may present with regurgitation along with vomiting, the difficulty in swallowing or dinophagia along with weight loss. These are the various presentation of carcinoma esophagus patient. A very commonly asked question, what are the various clinical features suggestive of advanced malignancy of carcinoma esophagus? You can enumerate like this: the recurrent laryngeal nerve palsy, Horner syndrome. I hope you all know all these things: the recurrent laryngeal nerve palsy, ENT, the Horner syndrome related to ophthalmology, and other features, the chronic spinal pain and diaphragmatic paralysis, maybe involvement of phrenic nerve, and if there is weight loss more than 20% with loss of appetite, all these features, they are suggestive of advanced malignancy. So complete cure is usually not possible if these features are there. Sometimes patient may present with cutaneous tumor metastasis with enlarged palpable supraclavicular lymph nodes. If these things are there, surgically unresectable tumor. The hoarseness due to recurrent angina paralysis, it's a sign of advanced and incurable disease. Again, palpable neck lymphadenopathy, another sign of advanced disease. So must remember all these various presentation of advanced malignancy of carcinoma esophagus, where you can only offer palliative care and no complete surgical cure as possible in these presentations. Whereas the patients presenting with early disease, these patients usually they present with non-specific dyspepsia, and usually patient complaining of a vague feeling of something that is not right during swallowing. Some problem is there, a vague feeling is there. And how to diagnose these early diseases? Obviously during upper GI endoscopy, during surveillance of Barrett's esophagus. But still in our country, most of the patients, they usually present late, so delayed presentation is there, poor prognosis. What is the take-home message? By knowing this, that most of the Barrett's esophagus surveillance upper GI endoscopy, the patient usually presents late after developing dysphagia and other symptoms like regurgitation and other things. The take-home message is widespread use of endoscopy should be used as a diagnostic tool, and we can make early diagnosis. And another take-home message is biopsy should be taken of all lesions in the esophagus, no matter how trivial they appear and irrespective of the indication. We have planned the patient for, let's say, some stomach disorder or some duodenal disorder, but we have found a lesion in the esophagus, take the biopsy of that lesion also. Right? So these are the basic take-home message for today's interaction. In next interaction, we'll discuss with the investigations, we'll go through the investigations and imaging studies in carcinoma esophagus. Any query you can write in the WhatsApp group. I would like to help you out. So thank you so much.